I know it feels like we just stopped talking about the iPhone 13, but guys, the iPhone 14 is only 10 months away. That's less than a year, so basically tomorrow, right? We gotta recap everything we know about it so far, which is basically nothing. But here's what we can speculate on based on what a few rumors are suggesting, a few leakers are talking about, and get you guys in the mindset of what you may get if you're waiting on next year's iPhone. Let's begin. So the Elec, a Korean website, published some information on what they believe could happen with the iPhone 14, but before I begin, let me disclose from the start, it's way too early, nothing is finalized, Apple has not completed the design, they're not in mass production yet, there is so much that changes throughout the year, and if you go back and watch anybody's channel, the amount of accurate leaks like 10 months before the iPhone launches, pretty rare. It's actually usually very wrong, so this is mostly for fun, just to keep you guys up to date on what we currently are aware of, but absolutely don't consider any of this confirmed or for sure happening. Either way though, this sounds like kind of a boring year in my opinion, but I kind of have been known for saying that every year, but iPhone 13 series somewhat catered to a lot of the things I care about, but in my view, less things average consumers care about, because I was really just there for 120 hertz. Everything else we got was secondary to me, but the Elec is suggesting that the Pro iPhones are going to be rocking punch hole displays and moving most of the sensors you need for Face ID underneath the screen. So that's actually pretty far in advance if you consider that it typically takes Apple a few years before they're able to order displays from suppliers that can actually keep up with what a lot of the Android market is doing. So under display cameras have existed, but some of them come with certain compromises, and yeah, there are some that don't really have to compromise much, but they're sold at such low volume, those displays are not mass produced at the scale of iPhones. And yes, mass production is hard. That does influence what Apple is able to implement in their new iPhone every year. So, according to Ross Young, who is a supply chain analyst, allegedly it's easier to put, the dot projector and the infrared scanner underneath the display than it is the actual selfie camera, because all those other sensors are just kind of collecting data. They don't really have to showcase selfies or handle FaceTime calls. So, allegedly, that's what Apple's prioritizing on the iPhone 14, making sure that the front-facing camera is still good, but all the other sensors, yes, they're gonna bake behind the pixels of your iPhone. But interestingly, they're only doing that on the 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max. There's supposed to be a regular iPhone 14 and a larger option, and that brings me to some of the bad news in this report, which is that Apple is planning on scrapping the mini series of iPhone next year, which bums me out because I really enjoyed the 12 mini, and I never used the 13 mini extensively, but I think it fixed a lot of the issues the 12 mini had going for it, and Quo has agreed on this report as well. It's looking more and more likely that instead of having, your regular 6.1-inch iPhone and then a smaller version, in 2022 they want to have a larger version that's still cheaper than the Pros, which, considering how bigger display seems to be selling super duper well, and there's a ton of people that will always buy the Pro Max iPhone, not because they really care that much about the improved cameras or the better battery life, but they mainly just want a bigger screen in any way, shape, or form. And until potentially next year, the only way to get a 6.7-inch iPhone was to get the Pro Max model, so that's what a lot of people ended up doing. But if there's now going to be a way to buy a 6.7-inch iPhone for under $1,000, I'll go out on a limb here and say that might end up being the best seller, because as much as I rave about the mini iPhone and how I want that to sell better, and I wish Apple would keep it around, I'd be even fine if they did a 14 Max, because there's no Pro, and then a 14 mini, let's just complicate the iPhone lineup even further. Why not? It's still nothing compared to how many frickin' phones Samsung and OnePlus release every year. So 5 iPhones, maybe 6 with the SE. It's not terribly crazy. It's definitely crazier than the Steve Jobs era, where he was like, one size, good, we're fine now. No, now we can have like this wide range of options to choose from. But the good news is, based on how Apple kept around the 12 mini even into this year at a discounted price, that means that they should probably keep it around another year, meaning you'll be able to buy the 13 mini for $600 and you'll be able to buy the 12 mini for $500. That's a pretty good deal, I would say. Coming close on that like iPhone SE replacement territory, but no one has really come forward with expected pricing on this model. But if it works anything like Apple typically does, where they usually work with $100 increments, this iPhone 14 Max model should start around $900. So it's $100 less than the Pro series. You get a bigger display, and at least according to the Elec, as of right now, 120 Hz ProMotion should just be on the Pros. So that might be something you have to shell out the extra money for if you care about that buttery smooth display like I do. But sure, there's a lot of average consumers out there that don't care at all about ProMotion. They'd be perfectly fine with 60 hertz, so this could all change, of course, but as of right now, it sounds like the 14 and 14 Max will still be rocking 60 hertz OLED displays with the standard size notch that we see on the iPhone 13 series, and then the 14 Pro, 14 Pro Max, they'll get 120 hertz LTPO panels with the punch hole camera, but it certainly feels like a weird feature to restrict to the Pros. I mean, I get the idea that those under display sensors are gonna cost more to produce, so they gotta put it on the higher price model, but just from the consumer's perspective, spend extra money and you get punch hole instead of notch. Is that normal consumer going to care about that type of thing? Probably not. That's why they brand it as a pro thing, because maybe people in the tech community will appreciate a punch hole more so. Do they get the battery percentage back, Apple, or are you still going to restrict that from ever being accessible on iPhones again? I don't know how they're going to do it, but aside from that, there's actually not too much exciting things to look forward to. I mean, John Prosser talked about them going with circular volume buttons to match the iPhone 4, but I think they kind of ditched that intentionally because it was harder to feel for and click, and especially on a big phone like a 6.7-inch display, circular buttons are going to be kind of annoying. And I also kind of doubt the camera bump going away, just because Apple year after year after year just makes the camera bump larger and larger and larger, and they don't really seem to care about making sure that it gets smaller at all. So the idea that they would increase the back and make it so thick that the camera bump goes away would likely make it much thicker than most people realize. So there's talk of the Pros maybe moving to a titanium design, but of course there would still be aluminum on the 14 and 14 Max. I would still expect frosted glass on the Pros and glossy glass on the back of the regular 14s, but as far as we're aware, Lightning is still sticking around. Hopefully the EU is able to pass that law that could force Apple to switch to USB-C, in which case ideally they would switch to Type-C across everything. I think it'd be very weird for them to be like just USB-C in Europe and then Lightning everywhere else. But also every year we always get reports claiming that Apple wants to do a portless iPhone, and then they end up chickening out and not doing it. I wish they would just commit to one or the other, but honestly, USB-C I think would make the most amount of people happy. They're already using it across so many of their own devices. However, none of the reports so far are claiming Apple has come to a decision on that. No one is saying USB-C will be on the iPhone 14 lineup, so my prediction, I could end up being wrong, but I think Apple's gonna chicken out once again and just have Lightning as standard across everything, and the EU won't get their act together in time, so the laws aren't going to be passed before Apple releases this iPhone, and that's just gonna bum me out further. However, the A16 chip, which might actually be based on the 4nm architecture, will probably allow for some improved camera features. I can't think of much else they can do with this insane graphics and CPU power baked into a phone, but the one thing I can think of is cinematic mode being limited to 1080 at 30. They improve those cameras and their low light performance a little bit. Maybe the LiDAR sensor can collect a bit more data. So maybe just the Pro iPhones or something are able to do cinematic mode at 4K at 60, and with that higher write speed, they could probably get ProRes recording to 4K at 60. Those felt like obvious limitations of the time with the iPhone 13 series, so I have to imagine they'll figure that all out and fix it with next year's update. But a lot of things that are rumored for next year's iPhones have not really been solidified for next year. There's talk of periscope lenses, so you can have really far zoom, but most reports are saying that will be in the 2023 lineup. We know Apple's going to be switching to their own in-house designed modems on iPhone and moving away from Qualcomm, but that's also rumored to introduce in 2023. So as of right now, to me, the iPhone 14 lineup sounds fairly stale. Maybe some better battery life, you know, some better cinematic mode recording. Perhaps they make the switch to titanium, which I guess would look kind of cool. Maybe some punch hole cameras, but if any of these things sound like deal makers to you, feel free to let me know down in the comments, because I have decided I am holding on to my 13 Pro Max for several years. I'm not gonna buy and keep the iPhone 14. I'll certainly review them for the channel, but that's it. I don't plan on like permanently switching over to it. But of all the features we've talked about so far, what do you think would make the biggest difference in your daily routine? All that good stuff. Let me know what you're thinking down below. This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you guys in the next one.